All right, I am here at day 3 postpartum going over the things that I'm working on. Keep in mind, everything is still really in and around the bed. This does not have to be something where I'm going to a gym or getting even on the floor. Though getting on the floor is appropriate if you feel ready to. You don't have to just stay in your bed. You can just go right down to the floor and do a few movements as long as it feels good for your body. The intention of this postpartum rehab is not to get back to running right now. It's just to keep our body feeling good and in a good space so that we can move around a little bit easier, because it's really hard after birth with different birth injuries and just how our core feels to even move and get out of bed. So a lot of this stuff is just that preparatory work so that we can go into the rehab that'll allow us to move better and get us back to what we love doing. So the day 3 is working on breath still, although now, as opposed to just laying in bed and working on breath, which I'm still doing, I'm working on now in a seated position where I'm really working on that full expansion and passive exhale. And I'm starting to do a little bit of an activation with the exhale because it feels appropriate for my body right now with how my birth was. So I'm now inhaling. And on the exhale, I'm thinking of a slight pelvic floor lift. So for me, I have a lot of experience with pelvic floor activations. It's something that you might have to work on extra cueing with somebody to understand what your pelvic floor connection is and how to get that for yourself. So sometimes I tell people, imagine that you're drinking a milkshake up through a straw, through your vagina. In the early days postpartum, when the connection is super weird with all the trauma that's happened in the nerves from pushing a baby out or epidural and all that type of stuff, is I say, imagine that you need to hold in a toot, that you're about to toot right now, hold that in, and that can be helpful. So on that breath that I'm working on, some has just been laying down, some has been seated, and I've done a few when I've gone to the bathroom, when I've walked to the bathroom and I've done washing my hands, that all work on a standing breath. But what I'm doing is just a nice passive inhale, passive exhale, and then I've done a few where I'm including that pelvic floor. So passive inhale, and then the exhale, I'm thinking of a slight pelvic floor lift, not a grip. We don't usually want to do a grip in general, but definitely in this stage where our pelvic floor went through a lot, it's more just like a, hey, wake up muscles. Let's just remember how to activate you. So beyond the pelvic floor, with the breathing addition, or to the adding to the breathing, I've been massaging my abdominal wall. So a lot of this work, I'm going to come down onto the bed here, is been massaging my abdominal wall, just like how I've done in day 1 and day 2. I'm able to go a little bit deeper now on myself, and I'm still doing a little bit of fundal massage. I can feel my uterus is definitely getting a lot smaller, and this is all light massage, just bringing blood flow to the area, feeling where I'm tender and working out some of those tender points, because these abs went through a lot during pregnancy and did a lot of work during labor and birth as well. So in this position, I'm also been working on abdominal activations, and it's just that activation. This is not a abdominal workout at all. I am going to imagine that my lower belly is lifting up. So it's not down into the ground. It's just a slight lift up, as if I'm kind of putting on like jeans that are too tight, a lift up and then release. And I've just been doing a few activations like that just to connect to those muscles, because they have been really stretched out, and it's really nice to start connecting to them. So I actually like to feel my abs as I'm doing them, and they feel way different than they used to, but they won't for forever. This is just the initial stage of connecting my brain's awareness to my abdominal wall. I had talked before about my pelvic floor feeling really tight when I went to the restroom, as it was a protective mechanism for all the stretch that happened during my vaginal birth, that my body was like, oh, there was like a lot going on, and now the muscles are tight. So I wasn't gripping my pelvic floor, but when I'd go to the restroom, I could feel it was tight. So I've been working the first 2 days on releasing pelvic floor, and now I don't feel any of that tension. So what I've started doing now that I've no longer felt that tension is now I've started just a slight pelvic floor lift outside of that active breathing I spoke about a moment ago. So I'm just doing a slight engagement of that pelvic floor. I'm lifting up and then releasing. And it's just that it's a lift. Again, it's not a grip of the abs or the pelvic floor. There's just no need to do that to these muscles, but it's literally just like a wake up. And the abdominal wall and pelvic floor are still working. So even if you don't feel connected to them, when you get out of bed and you sit up and you walk to the bathroom, those muscles have to work. It's part of your core. But this is more of a conscious, my brain is telling me to do it, and it's doing it when I tell it to. So that's that activation connection. So right now, I'm just in the connection phase to my abdominal wall. the connection face to my pelvic floor, and I'm working on that breath. I'm massaging out this area. So everything in this region has been really gentle. Now, another aspect of what I have been working on that I'm adding on a little bit more to today at day 3, because I'm feeling so much stronger already, which is so wild to see how beautiful the body heals, is I'm doing a little bit higher of a lift with my glute bridges. So I talked yesterday about just butt squeezes, and now I'm doing I did a little bit of an elevation the other day. And now I'm lifting up just a little bit more because it feels appropriate for where my body's at. So I'm coming back down, and then I'm lifting up. So you can see a full glute bridge would be up to here. I don't really feel ready for that. Doing one is fine, but I feel really good with doing these mini ones. So coming up a little bit higher than yesterday. And what I'm doing is what I train my patients on, which is as I rise up, I'm just doing a slight lift of my lower belly and a slight lift of the pelvic floor. If you could say maximum contraction is 100%, I'm doing about a 30 to 40% activation. So it's just a very minimal, just touching in to those muscles. So you're gonna see me get out of this position. I'm not gonna sit up. I probably could pull it off, but it's really hard for my abs. It's gonna be a lot nicer for my abs and my low back for me to actually roll to my side and push myself up. The other big thing that I've added today has been a little bit more mobility for my body. So I've actually gotten down on the ground today, which instead I'll just show you on the bed. And I've done a few things like crossing my legs and just leaning forward, which this alone is getting a stretch into my glute, which has been really nice feeling because I've been feeling really tight in my sacrum. So I've been reaching forward and to the side, opening up. I talked before about how you can do seated cat-cow, do nice rotational openers. Just sitting here with the chest come forward, and then roll your shoulders down and back. Just get that chest opening up, moving that neck around. So I've just been trying to move a lot more and flow through what feels good. So a lot of times people want an exact thing to do. As long as it feels good and it doesn't feel like you're stretching anything in your pelvic floor, maybe you had stitches in that region, or it doesn't feel like you're stretching in your belly region too much, or maybe you had a belly birth and there's stitches there, then you're going to be fine. So if you do this and it doesn't feel like you're stretching anything too much, it doesn't feel wrong, then do that. If you're stretching up like this and you're like, oh, it's too much, then don't do that, right? So I've been doing a lot of flow today. And by a lot, I mean like 2 minutes here and there, where I'm just opening up my body, and there's no exact one way in which I'm doing it. And I think it's important to know that it's just flowing through movement. So right now, like I said, just sitting cross-legged and reaching forward has been getting into my low back and glutes more than it ever would before, just because how tight I am. And then I've had to switch which leg goes forward, and then I get the other glute a little bit more. So it's been feeling really good. I would not be doing a butterfly right now. So the cross-legged hasn't been too much on my pelvic floor. Butterfly would spread it out too much. That would not feel good. So I'm going within what feels good for my body. I've even lengthened out my legs and just reached forward a little bit. I wasn't cranking, just a little bit of a stretch. The posterior chain, so the back of your body, gets really tight because you're rounded over. And so I found that I need to open it up. That's what I felt today at day 3 of rounding over a baby. And then I've also felt really nice just opening up that part that's been crunched in, opening it up. So biggest things are a greater connection to that core at day 3 for me, because that's where I felt appropriate for my body. And working on a little bit more for those glutes, and then more mobility. But within that, still massaging, still stretching, still working on breath. So there's a lot of these foundations that stay throughout for me, and whenever I'm working on my rehab for myself or for my patients. But then there's these little things we just add on a little bit each day, depending on where we are at. And it's gonna be a little bit different for myself because I work on this and navigate it with other people and been very in tune with my body, so I know what to do and when to do it type thing. So that's just my journey where I'm at. Day 3, I'm already at very, very minimal bleeding. Not even fully day 3, I'm at day 2.5. My bleeding is very minimal, which allows me to know that the movements that I'm doing, very gentle in bed or even on the floor, are totally appropriate. As you're going through rehab, if you notice an uptick in bleeding, it's a good idea if you're adding on walks and things like that to slow that down. That increase in bleeding lets your body know like it's too much. So the fact that I'm at like bleeding is very low, very minimal, not completely none, I'm in a good spot. But if it started picking up, I'd pay attention to, am I doing more around the house? Am I going on walks that are too long? And then I would slow it down. Speaking of walks, I will not be doing my first walk until 2 weeks, as long as I'm not bleeding. And that's something that I would appreciate all of my patients to do, is to wait until 2 weeks, just because we don't want to put too much pressure on that pelvic floor. And we really want to make sure that that bleeding has come to an end. And then it's appropriate time to start the first walk and have it be about 10 minutes.